Hello, welcome to another one of my videos. This video is configure VNetwork standard switches and VSS policies. Understand the VNetwork standard switch VSS. Determine appropriate VLAN configuration for the vSphere implementation. We've got the vCenter up and running, and we've got the ESXi up and running and connected to. We're not got to the point we can work with virtual machines. We have more infrastructure to put in place. We have to do the networking and storage. Networking, the type of storage is the type of which is remote connection to the storage. Later I will show you how to install iSCSI on a Windows 2008 server to connect to a SAN storage device. Two switches which are important: standard switches and distributed switches. The standard switches is configured for specific ESXi hosts you're working on. Great for a small environment. A couple of things you need to know. The standard switch, that the configuration on one host is equivalent on all the other hosts. Great for small environments. If you have 300 hosts, making all the switches are correct, it's a little bit more challenging. There are a few networks you need to be aware of. A VM environment will have some production network. When the virtual machines are running, Exchange server needs to talk to the Outlook clients over some sort of network, and that's the production network where that communication occurs. In most networks would be a dual connection minimum, and there would be a dual bonding connection. If I lose one of my physical connections, I have the ability to pass the network over to the remaining connection of the server. Production network is important. That's the communication path with my virtual machines. Workloads and client servers working within the environment, but that's only one of many networks which you have to be aware of if you're thinking about vCenter needs. Another one is the storage network. For most environments, the storage network is a different network to the production network. Lots of reasons for this storage traffic. Many environments tends to be at a level with throughput is required that is much greater than production networks. So I'm running single gigabit connections. I may need to have a separate pair of connections that get my ESXi server down to its storage. I separate these out in one single gigabit world because I want to make sure that the connections on the storage network not going to impact the ability of the virtual machines talk to their clients. Separating these out can be a project myself. Overuse across the network connections. ESXi likes it if you have a separate management network that is for issuing commands between a vCenter server over to the ESXi server. Why do you think I need to separate a network? The only reason for this network send those network commands to the ESXi host that would normally go over to the production network. It can in many environments. On a security perspective, it's always a good idea to separate out those networks for the types of commands that vCenter can actually send to ESXi virtual machines. Do you have a data center? Probably. In that data center, do you have to lock the door on the data center? Sure. Why did we lock the door on the data center store? Well, because there are items in the data center you probably don't want people messing around with. There are servers in there. Those servers have power cables, buttons, connections, storage. We don't want somebody accidentally unplugging or rearranging. That's why we lock the data center door. If I pass that management network traffic across my production network. No difference than me having a data center and leaving the door unlocked. From within vCenter, I can power on virtual machines, I can connect, I can disconnect connections. I have the physical world and logical world in the vCenter management network to adjust to appropriate places. VMotion Network is designed in virtual machines and needs to pass host to host that we actually separate out to the process of transferring out information. The route of information transfers from one host to the other onto its own network, so that none of the potential congestion that exists on the production network, storage network, or even the management network will impact across process of VMotion. You can hybrid the management network and the VMotion network together. However, sometimes that VMotion may consume throughput, thereby preventing me issuing the management commands I need to. So I have two connections for my production network and two for my storage network, one for my management network and one for VMotion network. All of a sudden we have the network cards for all the networks it needs to support. These networks will be connected to the physical cards. It is not necessary in the case that you have to include as physical network connections if your needs for throughput. These connections would allow you to combine these connections under a smaller network cards. So let's assume instead of using a single gigabyte connector, what I want to do is to ease the process of dealing with the networks that I have. I don't want to deal with 6 different network cards in each ESXi host. Instead of having a single gigabyte connection, I have some 8 gigabyte connection or 4 gigabyte connections. Maybe when I have production and storage VMotion traffic that would be passing across them probably is eating to consume the maximum throughput available. In these cases, it may make sense to one single pair of connections that are not of the network access layer, that are at the trunk layer, that connect to the rest of the physical network. Now, doing so requires some magic occurs at the network side. The network engineers going to deliver these connections to you. You can create a connection and provide a series of different VLANs, all of which pass the same pair of connections for the different types of networks are required: production, storage, management, VMotion, over separate VLANs and separate isolated subnets. You have a lot of options how to design your network. For vCenter, provide a series of VLANs which pass for the different types of networks that are required be over your isolated VLANs and separate subnets. I'd like to thank you for watching my first part of configuring VNetwork standard switches and the VSS policies. Part 2 is going to be the actual configuration. I'd like to thank you for watching my first part of configuring VNetwork standard switches and the VSS policies. Part 2 is going to be the actual configuration. Hi, I would like to thank you for watching my first part of configuring VNetwork standard switches and VSS policies. In the next part it will be actually the configuration of the practical work in building the ESXi networking design.